Hey everyone, welcome back, and today we're going to be ranking the many safe houses across Great Bear. Now, I personally prefer to give you guys shorter, sweeter videos, and there are obviously a lot of safe house choices to cover. So today I'm going to focus on a lot of the more popular safe house locations, sprinkle a few nicher ones in, and if there are more safe houses that you guys want me to cover and add to this list, we can cover those in future videos. We're going to do just 10 locations in this video, and before we hop into the tier list, let's first talk about the factors that we're going to use to determine where we place these safe houses. We're going to rate each safe house from 1 to 10 in the following categories: direct resource accessibility, resources throughout the region and of easy access to the safe house location; indoor utilities, whether the safe house contains things like beds, storage, and crafting; location within the world, how easily the rest of Great Bear is accessible from the safe house; and crafting accessibility, how many crafting methods are easily accessible from the safe house. I'm wanting to make a tier list here that is a bit more objective on their quality rather than how I personally feel about the safe houses. But of course, it's going to be hard to fully get rid of that kind of bias. So I will say that keep in mind that this is still going to be my opinion and my own personal list. And you may prefer one safe house over another, and that's totally fine. You do you, and that's the most important thing when it comes to this game. Since we have these 4 categories, there's potential for up to 40 points for each safe house. So the tiers will be divided as such. F tier will be 0 to 5 points, D tier 6 to 10 points, C tier 11 to 20, B tier is going to be 21 to 30, A tier 31 to 35, and S tier is 36 to 40. Starting off with Pleasant Valley Farmhouse. This safe house is located smack dab in the middle of Pleasant Valley, and has abundant resources within the region. There are several bears to hunt, nearby moose spawns, as well as wolf packs and deer herds that roam just outside the safe house. There are many quality loot spawns to be found throughout the valley, and the farmhouse itself has more than enough room to hold it all. The farmhouse is going to start off very strong, getting itself a 10 for direct resource availability. The interior is very large, with the main house having 2 floors full of dressers, cabinets, containers, and a bed, as well as a fireplace if you want to have a cozy sip of herbal tea by the fire. In the basement, there are even more containers as well as a lot of shelves and lockers, providing even more storage for you. There's truly nothing more you could ask for in regards to indoor utilities than this place has to offer, so it's going to get a 10 there. In regards to world location, the farmhouse is also pretty good here, but it's not fantastic. Pleasant Valley has good quick connections to Coastal Highway, which is amazing for the trader, a pretty quick route to Bleak Inlet, and a relatively short path to Ash Canyon and Timberwolf Mountain, 2 regions with invaluable loot opportunities. However, it doesn't have nearly as good of access to the more western regions of Great Bear, and is very far away from the entrance to the far territories, making the journeys there and back a bit more tedious. So we're going to have to give the farmhouse a 7 in world location. The final category is crafting accessibility. The farmhouse has a tool bench all ready to go in the basement once you arrive, and a wonderful 6-slot cooking stove in the kitchen. It's got a pretty quick route to the ammunition and milling machines in Bleak Inlet, which is all you're going to need for a non-interloper save. The catch here is that there's not really any easy nearby forge locations, with the closest forges being located in the Riken or the Old Spence family homestead, making forging a trickier task. So this location's going to land itself with a 7 in crafting accessibility. Pulling all those points together, the Pleasant Valley Farmhouse has a total of 35 points, landing itself high up in the A tier. Next, let's talk about the Lonely Lighthouse. This cozy little spot is in the center of Desolation Point and has a fantastic seaside view. While detached from the mainland on a tiny peninsula, and wolves that patrol nearby, it is a quaint and beautiful place. Located nearby is an old mine shaft, church, the Riken, and Hibernia processing. There are a lot of resources available in these spots, but the region itself is pretty small. Thankfully, there are plenty of resources to be had long-term for those who enjoy beachcombing. Since there isn't a whole lot of loot to be had in the region, but there is high quality and beachcombing, Lonely Lighthouse gets itself an 8 for direct resource availability. The lighthouse is a bit tougher for indoor utilities. There are a couple containers, lockers, and it does have a bed, with the downsides being that there's only a potbelly stove, the place is quite cramped, and there's no workbench inside. Because of this, it's only going to get a 5 here. Another area that this cute little lighthouse is going to struggle with is going to be world location. Being in Desolation Point, it's in a dead-end region at the very far corner of Great Bear. It's very hard to get farther away from western regions of Great Bear and the far territories than it is here. If you ever want to get out to the far territories, Bleak Inlet, or any other western regions, it's going to become a very long journey for you. So the lighthouse will only get a 3, as it's very tough to be more disconnected from Great Bear apart from living out in the far territories or in Ash Canyon. Now, if my predictions hold true and Perseverance Mills end up north of Desolation Point and the 2 regions connect, then it may get a point or 2 higher, but for now, it's going to sit at that 3. Finally, let's talk about crafting accessibility. Here's a spot where the lighthouse really shines. Having a stove in the building, although small, the forge in the Riken only a short walk away, and a workbench in Hibernia processing, you have access to nearly any crafting you'll ever want to do. The Lonely Lighthouse is going to get an 8 here, with the only thing keeping it from being a 10 being the fact that Bleak Inlet's a decent ways away, and the smaller stove makes cooking and melting slower. Tallying all of that up, we have a total of 24 points, which puts this lighthouse into the B tier. Up next is an oldie but a goodie, the Camp Office. This beautiful spot is right on the shores of Great Bear's own Mystery Lake. Deer roam in nearby clearings, moose can spawn right nearby, and many deer like to roam nearby as well. There's more wildlife and fishing huts than you could ever ask for here. This spot will have plenty of replenishable hunting throughout all stages of the game. Additionally, it is really close to high-quality loot locations such as the Carter Hydro Dam, Trapper's Cabin, and Lake Cabins. The Camp Office is going to get a 9 for direct resource availability. There isn't as much loot to find as in Pleasant Valley, but you should get everything you're ever going to need. Indoor utilities aren't a problem for this safe house at all. It's got both a potbelly stove and a 2-slot stove as well, and there is already a workbench inside the office when you arrive. There's plenty of bedding, shelves, containers, a trader radio already inside, and there's more than enough space for safe house customization. The Camp Office easily gets a 10 for indoor utilities. Next up is world location. All one needs to say about this spot is that it is the gold standard for base world locations. It is smack dab in the middle of Lower Great Bear and has a quick and easy route to all of the areas of the island with very easy access to Bleak Inlet and Coastal Highway. The Camp Office gets a 10 here. Now for crafting accessibility. As we talked about before, the office already has several stoves and a workbench inside. There is a forge very quickly accessible after a short walk into Forland Muskeg, and Bleak Inlet is just around the corner from that. The Camp Office is super strong here as well, so it's going to be getting an 8 for crafting accessibility. Everything's there, it just might be a little bit of a walk away, which keeps it from a 10. This lovely home gets a whopping 37 points in total, becoming our first S tier. The Quonset Garage is a cute little place, and definitely makes for a great fortress against the cold. With the roomy interior being filled with food and high-quality tools, it definitely makes it a fantastic spot to hunker down. There may be wolves and bears that wander nearby, but you also will sometimes see herds of deer and maybe the occasional moose. Plus, nothing beats that seaside view. Coastal Highway is a place that is abundant in resources, shelter, and wildlife. With so much around, plus the benefit of absolutely fantastic beachcombing, the garage will get a 10 for direct resource availability. As far as indoor utilities go, it's got all that you'll need. A workbench, trading radio, and a fire barrel as well. Plus, all the decorating space you'll ever want, so it's going to get a 9 here, with the only thing keeping it from a 10 being that it doesn't have quite as much cooking space as the Camp Office or the farmhouse. World location is a little bit trickier. In regards to the center of Great Bear, the garage is between the Camp Office and Lonely Lighthouse, so it's going to be closer to everything than the Lonely Lighthouse, but farther than the office. So to avoid having to re-go over all the details, we'll just put the garage in between what those two safe house locations scored and give it a 7 for world location, getting a little bit of a bonus for being right next to Sutherland's trading post, with the biggest downside being how far from the Far Territories access it is. Finally, crafting availability. This safe house has a workbench, cooking surfaces, and is only a short ways away from the forge and the Riken. It is a little bit of a walk to that forge and into the ravine to Bleak Inlet, but apart from that, you'll have fairly good access to all crafting you'll need. Because of this, the Quonset Garage is going to get a 7 in crafting accessibility, and lands a total of 33 points, just below the Pleasant Valley Farmhouse in the A tier. We've been looking over a lot of safe houses in the old Great Bear civilizations, so let's depart a little bit over to Timberwolf Mountain where we can take a look at the Mountaineer's Hut. This beautiful little spot overlooks Crystal Lake at the base of Timberwolf Mountain, and although it is a bit of a fixer-upper, you can't beat that scenic view. Wolf packs and bears roam frequently nearby, along with deer, rabbits, and moose as well. There's even a convenient little fishing hut on the lake for you to use. There may not be much civilization near you, but you have the remains of the old plane crash to scavenge, and if you get your hands on a hacksaw to open up those containers, you won't need to worry about your survival for long. The cargo containers will have everything you need, but until you get them cracked open, survival will be a little bit tough. This hut will get itself an 8 for direct resource availability. This place is also fairly good in regards to indoor utilities. It has a workbench, bed, and fireplace with 2 cooking slots. The biggest downside in this regard is that the hut is very small with only a couple small containers to store supplies. It has what you'll need for the most part, but struggles with some of the quality of life things, so it's going to get 6 points here, beating out the Lonely Lighthouse due to the workbench located within. Now let's talk about world placement. Since it's in Timberwolf Mountain, it's going to be a decent way away from the center of Great Bear, and it reaches far out from Bleak Inlet, the Far Territories, Western Great Bear regions, and Coastal Highway. I'm only going to give this spot a 2 here. It's just too disconnected from the rest of Great Bear, and it can't beat the Lighthouse's 3 because at least the Lighthouse has easy accessibility to trading. Crafting accessibility for this safe house will be tough for a similar reason. The nearest forge is going to be either the Riken or Old Spence family homestead, which both require completely traversing 3 regions to reach. On top of that, Bleak Inlet is incredibly far away, which makes the milling machine all that much harder to reach. So the Mountaineer's Hut will only be able to get a 4 for crafting accessibility. With all of that, this spot's going to get a total of 20 points, putting it at the top of C tier, much to my chagrin because I do love this spot. We've been looking a lot at the eastern Great Bear safe houses, so let's meander over to the other side of the island real quick and talk about Grey Mother's house. This massive 2-story home stands atop a hill at the center of Milton, overlooking the old abandoned town. Not too much wanders directly nearby, other than a couple rabbits and the occasional wolf or deer. But if you're lucky, a moose may choose to make its home just at the base of the hill that the house stands on. With all of the abandoned houses nearby, the Orca gas station, and the old farmhouse, you'll find all the resources you're going to need for a good long while here. This place will be joining our other 10-point resource locations. Indoor utilities will be a bit tougher. There's no workbench inside the building, but there are plenty nearby that you could work to relocate. There's going to be a fireplace and a 6-slot stove inside the safe house, as well as plenty of containers for you to store all your loot. Grey Mother's house is going to get an 8 for this category. The world location is also interesting here. If you take the southern exit of the region into Forland Muskeg, then the far territories are just a hop, skip, and a jump away. Additionally, you could travel across Forland Muskeg to reach Bleak Inlet really quickly as well. The biggest thing that this safe house lacks for world location is quick and convenient access to trading. There's a radio in the post office for you to use, but actually reaching the trading post will require you to travel through Mystery Lake, the ravine, and then all the way through Coastal Highway. It's not great, but it certainly could be worse. This place is going to get a 7 for world location for the opposite reason that Quonset Garage did, being far away from the trading post but closer to the far territories. Crafting accessibility is also fairly good for this spot. As I mentioned before, Forland Muskeg is just a quick day's journey out from the house, which gives access to a forge. And a bit farther out from that is Bleak Inlet, so I'm going to give it 7 points for crafting accessibility, just because everything is accessible, but a little bit far away. With all of that, the Grey Mother's house totals at 32 points, just below Quonset Garage in the A tier. Now, I want to talk about a place that is near and dear to my heart, the first safe house that I ever used frequently, and the coziest place I've ever been, the Trapper's Cabin. Now, since this place is super close to the camp office, we're going to be using it to compare Trappers to. The office got a 9 in direct resource availability, and the Trappers will be close behind that with an 8. The reason it lags behind is because Trappers is tucked in the very corner of Mystery Lake, so getting out to the rest of the region is a longer journey than it would be from the camp office, which is in the center. For indoor utilities, Trapper's Cabin has a workbench, bed, 2-slot stove, and a couple containers for storage. Its biggest downside is that it's a very small location, restricting how much room you'll have for safe house customization. Due to this, we'll be giving it an 8 for indoor utilities. World location is also basically the same as camp office, which got a 10. So we're going to bump it down to a 9 just because, once again, it's in the very corner of the region, making it less centered than the camp office. It'll get the same score as the office in regards to crafting accessibility though, because despite being in the corner of the region, farther from the access routes to Bleak Inlet and Coastal Highway, it is closer to Forland Muskeg and the forge there, so it's going to keep the office's score of 8. All of that lands Trappers with 34 points, a tie with the Pleasant Valley Farmhouse. I'm going to put it below the farmhouse though, due to how much more room and customizability the farmhouse has to offer. Now we're going to move on to the last popular safe house spot for this video, which is the Hunting Lodge and Broken Railroad. This lodge is located on a cute little clearing atop a cliff overlooking a small lake near the maintenance shed. There are a lot of wolves that like to snoop around the lodge itself, but also moose and rabbits as well. If you head down the cliff, whether it be by hiking trail or rope climb, you'll find a bear that roams below, and quite a few herds of deer as well. This lodge and the nearby maintenance shed has plentiful resources inside, but aside from that, there isn't much you're going to be able to find in the region, so the direct resource availability is going to be a 6 for the Hunting Lodge, as whatever you don't find in those two regions, you're likely not going to find anywhere nearby. For indoor utilities, the lodge does very well. There are plenty of beds, storage containers, a workbench, and even a 6-slot cooking stove as well. That, plus the 3 floors of space to decorate to your heart's content, will give this lodge a 10 for indoor utilities. World location isn't great here though. Much like the Trapper's Cabin, the Hunting Lodge is in the very corner of Broken Railroad, already making it very disconnected from the transitions to other regions. On top of that, you have to go back through all of Broken Railroad and then Forland Muskeg to be able to access Bleak Inlet, and from Forland Muskeg through Mystery Lake and the ravine to even reach Coastal Highway. So it's very disconnected from trading and the milling machine. The bright side here is that it is just a small hop to the far branch line that takes you to the far territories, so you at least have that. World location is going to be a 2. It's right next to the far territories, but almost the entirety of Lower Great Bear away from trading and Bleak Inlet. Crafting accessibility is a bit easier though, so the lodge will be able to scrape some more points there. The maintenance shed is a short walk away and has a lovely forge right inside, which, combined with the workbench in the lodge itself and the 6-slot cooking stove, will be all the major crafting you're going to need for most scenarios. The only downside is, again, the great distance to Bleak Inlet, so crafting accessibility will be a 7 for the Hunting Lodge. All of that gives this safe house a total of 25, just edging out the Lonely Lighthouse and the B tier. For our last 2 locations in this video, we're going to have some more niche picks that wouldn't be the first to your mind. We're now going to talk about the Angler's Den. This little hut is located in the center of Ash Canyon. It's a small little hut, and apart from the mining buildings high above, it's the only real shelter you'll find in the area. There are many wolves that roam the area, but there is a deer and rabbit grove nearby. With it being a treacherous journey to the nearby places, the direct resource availability in the den is not very good, so it's going to be getting a 3 here. Yes, there are a lot of things to be found in the region, but you'll need to know how to navigate the canyon properly to find them, and you'll likely need to venture out of the region quickly to become more self-sustainable. Indoor utilities aren't too horrible. You'll find a workbench inside, as well as a potbelly stove and bed. There are some storage options, but not too many, and the building is very small, which gives it limited customization options. Due to it having a workbench inside, it is going to beat out the lighthouse for utilities, but not by much, scraping by with a 6. World location is bad news for this spot though. You quite literally could not get farther away from the far territories than Ash Canyon. The nearest forge is at a minimum 4 regions away, and access to Bleak Inlet or the Trader is also 3 to 4 regions away. So I'm sorry to all the Angler's Den enthusiasts, but this is simply the worst spot for a main safe house in regards to accessing the rest of Great Bear. So it's going to get a 1. Crafting accessibility is going to be a similar tone, as we just talked about with the distance to Bleak Inlet and the forges. I'm sure you understand that it's not looking good for Angler's Den. Having the stove and workbench will keep it from falling below a 5, but being so far away from other crafting needs means that it's not going to get above that either. So our total for this spot is going to be a 15, putting Angler's Den at the bottom of the list in C tier. Alrighty guys, location number 10. We're almost done. The final place we're going to discuss today is going to be Misanthrope's Homestead. This is going to be a quick and easy one, as it's going to be mostly the same as the Quonset Garage. It keeps the 10 for direct resource availability, but it will suffer a lot of points in indoor utilities as it lacks any cooking slots or workbenches. So instead of a 9, it's going to get a 2, staying away from a 1 because it does have good storage and plenty of room for customization. World location is going to get bumped from a 7 to a 6 because it's far less central to the region than the garage. Crafting accessibility will also be mostly the same, but due to the fact that you need to travel to the garage for the nearest workbench, I'm going to drop it down to a 5, giving our final safe house for today a final score of 23, falling right behind the lighthouse in the B tier. Whew, we did it. That's all from me for today, guys. Remember that I tried to make this a bit more objective, but at the end of the day, just make your safe house where you feel the coziest. I can analyze all this as much as I want, but at the end of the day, what's most important on Great Bear is that you enjoy your quiet apocalypse. Sorry this video ran a little bit longer and maybe is a little bit rushed, but I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys all in the next one.